Moving countries can be one of the most exciting and most challenging things you'll ever do. And we're here to take one big worry off your plate: your taxes. At Expat Taxes, we understand the complexities of Irish tax from your perspective as an expat and tailor our advice to your needs. With decades of expertise, our team at Expat Taxes will help you navigate tax residency, cross-border taxation, reliefs and returns, and will work with your country's tax advisor to make sure your taxes are sorted. Whether you're an individual or a corporation coming from Australia, the United States, the UK, or anywhere in the world, we want to help you. So visit us at expattaxes.ie to book a consultation today, and let's make moving to Ireland easier together. Quick note before we get started. Unfortunately, there were a few microphone issues that unexpectedly arose during recording that means the guest's audio isn't up to our usual standard, and we ask your forgiveness there. But this episode covers some incredibly important stuff, so stick with us.
Welcome to Tax Bites for Expats, the top tax tips you want to know as an expat. The podcast is here to help answer the common queries and concerns expats have when moving to or from Ireland. Complex taxes explained simply. We'll focus on the Irish and international tax issues to be aware of to ensure you save time, money, and stress.
This is part one of Stephanie Wickham's conversation with Lisa Quinn O'Flaherty, a solicitor at Fitzsimons and Redmond LLP, and in this part one, you will hear about the house buying process and how it works from the legal side, a bit about the complicated subject of wills and succession planning in Ireland, and lots of tips from Lisa's experience of working with expats and Irish citizens living abroad. In the next episode, in part two, we'll be hearing a little bit more about cross-border estate management, the tax implications of inheritance in Ireland and abroad, and what it's like to work with a solicitor in Ireland. Enjoy.
Lisa Quinn O'Flaherty is a solicitor and a partner at Fitzsimons Redmond LLP. She works mainly in commercial law and employment law, but she's also passionate about providing a full suite of legal services to her many and varied clients. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to have a great chat about all the things our clients should know about when they come to Ireland and want to understand the legal system here and how it might apply to them, particularly in the context of probate, wills, inheritances. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real honour to be here. You've a great podcast, so I've enjoyed listening to it. It's nice to be a guest. Thank you.
Oh, well, we're very glad to have you. So my intro was brief. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got into the legal profession, and I suppose your role on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I studied law. I qualified as a solicitor in the Law Society of Ireland. I then qualified in England and Wales, and then in Northern Ireland. I studied arbitration, and I have membership of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. A few years ago, I was appointed by the Minister for Justice to the Classification of Films Appeal Board, and I'm a partner at Fitzsimons Redmond LLP. We are an all-service law firm. We're based in Dublin too, and we look after both business clients and individuals. And we look at commercial, residential tenancy, establishing business, all that comes with running a business. And we look after personal matters like family law, estate planning, everything like that. So we aim to have an all-round service for our clients. They can come to us with one thing and we'll look after everything for them.
Wow. It's interesting because, I often say when I speak to clients that tax issues tend to arise when, as a consequence of big life events. So I'd imagine that's your experience as well, is it, that you would maybe work with a client from when perhaps they're young and they set up a business right up until maybe their estate is being discharged. Talk us through kind of the main scenarios you find yourself working with individual clients and how that might apply to our listenership.
Yeah, so our clients are so varied. A lot of people will come to us for the very first time when they are buying their first home.
Mm-hmm.
And then they might come back to us if they're starting a business, if they're making kind of big changes in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
We will be there to help with all of that. So we find that once we establish a relationship with clients, there's a number of us in the firm. Between our experience and expertise, look after all their different needs. We have clients who come to us then later in their journey. They might, be coming up towards retirement or selling out of their company or something like that, and they need advice at that point. We're happy to jump in there and advise them. We work with foreign embassies, which are established in Ireland, so they're really nice clients to work with. They have particular needs and kind of balancing the law of their dispatching state and the laws and customs in Ireland. And that's similar where we have a couple of international companies who kind of have the same kind of competing laws. And then we would work with individuals who are moving back to Ireland after many years or who are moving to Ireland for the first time, whether that's because of a life change or a business situation or a new job. We kind of help guide them through all of the challenges and obstacles that might arise in being in a new location.
Actually, this probably leads me nicely into one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I'll use my own experience because the question is pertinent for my own respect as well. Our first home that we bought was in Australia, and my experience was that the legal system in terms of buying a house, mortgaging a house, it's quite standardized, and there's set time limits under the Australian standard process. A lot of clients, when they come to us, whether they're returning Irish expats or moving here for the first time, they're interested and sometimes shocked at how the legal system in Ireland works when you buy a house. Can you talk us through generally what happens when you purchase a home in Ireland, whether it be that, from when the offer's accepted, let's say, until you actually get the keys, and the role that a solicitor might play in that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that is probably the biggest cultural shock that people from outside of Ireland experience, that the process is very how long is a piece of string, really. So once you put an offer on your house, then you're going and you're getting surveys on the house, making sure that it's structurally okay, that it's compliant with all of the building regulations and all of that, and that it's safe to live in. And then there'll be an exchange of contracts, which happens kind of simultaneously to applying for your mortgage or getting your mortgage signed off on as well. Then there's kind of a period where the solicitors are working in the background, exchanging documents and making sure the title to the property, the trail of ownership to the property is in order. But it can be a long time. During that period, we're also providing documentation to the bank, so the bank that are satisfied that their investment is safe. And it can go on for an indefinite period. Really, there can be lots of delays, and it's not as rigid as in other countries where if something's getting quite delayed, almost automatically a notice will serve to say, hurry up and get these over to me immediately. There is that mechanism in Irish law. I don't think I've ever seen it used.
And just to kind of, I suppose, expand on that, what does exchange of contracts mean? When you said that there, what does that mean practically speaking?
Yeah. So when you make your offer on the house, you're not actually tied into the deal as yet. You'll pay part of a deposit, I suppose, not even your main deposit. You might pay 10% to the estate agent. And that's just to hold the property for you, so they don't take offers from or accept offers from other people. But until you've actually signed the contracts, you're not tied in. Neither side is tied in. So at the point of signing the contract, you will exchange the balance of the 10%, and then you're tied in, and you're stuck with the contract. I suppose both sides are.
Okay, so that's kind of the point of no return, let's call it.
That's exactly it. And at that point, you have to be satisfied that you have your mortgage monies, because you could end up in a very difficult situation where you're obliged to fulfill the contract, and the bank has decided not to give you the monies for whatever reason.
Yeah, of course. So I think that's interesting is, the takeaway there is whether you're buying a house in Ireland for the first time as an Irish person or as someone coming from another location where maybe you've had a mortgage there, the process isn't as set in stone. Rightly or wrongly, I often say to clients, that's probably not shocking given the fact that our land law is quite archaic compared to some newer countries, let's call it. But is there anything you'd suggest to somebody if your friend comes to you and says, Lisa, I'm thinking of buying a house? What are the things as a legal advisor or a solicitor in Ireland that you're cognizant of? Or if you were buying a house, what are you watching for to kind of help the process move along as quickly as possible?
Well, I think you can only control what's in your own sphere. So I would always tell people, before you even put an offer on the house, make sure you've sat down with a financial advisor and you have your finances in order. That when
Mm,
you go into the bank for your loan, that there's no problems there. Make sure that you're in a position where you can get your life assurance in place. Because for some people that can be a problem if they've had pre-existing illnesses or anything like that. But other than that, I think it's kind of manage the expectations. Expect to be outbid on houses when you see a price, a for sale price, that's not the price that the house will be sold for. It's a very competitive market. So yeah, you will be outbid a lot of times. So don't get too attached to any one property if at all possible. And then it's a matter of, keep the pressure on your solicitor, keep the pressure on the estate agent as well. Like you want to keep your case at the top of everyone's agenda. So, and you can do that without being, you don't have to phone every day, but,
gentle pressure.
if you feel like you haven't heard, make that ask. Not that work isn't being done. Like work is often being done in the background. You just don't, you're not being told on a step by step basis. But it's often is happening. And when you ask, you can feel a lot more reassured.
Yeah. It's because it's an emotional thing, isn't it? Buying a house. And particularly when you've just made a move. It brings me then, I suppose, to my next question. Can you give us a quick rundown, the 101 basic for people who perhaps are not familiar with the way that succession law works in Ireland? So, we kind of charting the journey of someone coming to Ireland, buying a house. Now they own an Irish asset. What are the issues they need to think about? And maybe just even through the lens of just generic. And then we can talk maybe about the international aspects as a secondary issue.
Yeah. So I suppose if a person, very broadly, if you have an Irish asset and it's a real property, it's a house, it's an apartment, it's a building, it's a field, that is going to be dealt with under Irish inheritance law.
Hmm.
99.9% of the time, you need to be making a will in Ireland. It becomes very messy if that property is being dealt with under Irish law with a foreign will or with no will at all. The best thing to do is make a will in Ireland. Our succession law is, I think it's probably less complex than in other jurisdictions. Certainly far less complex than in the United States, where everything is dealt with under a trust and things we don't use trusts very often. So yeah, things are dealt with under a will can be 3-4 pages, 2-3 pages often, and that's sufficient. The things to consider, I suppose, we have no forced inheritance rules per se. If you're married, your spouse is entitled to 1/3 of your estate. They can renounce that. If you have children, you have a duty to provide for them according to your means, whether that's in your lifetime or by will. So that's kind of very broad. And I suppose that's not set in stone about how you would do that at all. So often it doesn't impact people too much as long as they are being fair about how they're distributing their assets. You'll know this very well. The tax provisions means it's most advantageous to benefit your spouse, and secondarily, most advantageous to benefit your children in Ireland from a tax point of view. And then when we have people coming from other jurisdictions, that it's important that we link in with their planning solicitor or lawyer in their other jurisdiction, and so that their overall estate plan is harmonious. We always have to be really careful that the wording of a will in Ireland and the wording of a will in the other jurisdiction don't unintentionally provoke each other, which can happen. Like, I can only speak for Ireland, but a foreign will can be valid in Ireland if it meets the criteria of the Succession Act, which means a foreign will can revoke an Irish will without even trying to.
Yeah. And that can give rise, I suppose, to both unintended consequences in terms of who benefits from it. But I suppose from my perspective, from a tax perspective, one of the things that we would generally see, just to kind of add to what you said there, is, let's say somebody has worked with a sister and drawn up an Irish will to pass, for example, the family home. If they inadvertently pass the full estate under that will, because they have, for example, revoked the foreign will, they've inadvertently brought the whole estate into the Irish tax net, because assets passing under an Irish will are always subject to Irish inheritance tax. So It's the value of understanding, and even just down to that, like one line in a document that hasn't been thought about can really warrants attention. I'm sure you see that with clients who are coming back from abroad, that this is an area that when everything's settled and the move and the house has been bought, let's sit down and think about it. Is that something you would encourage your clients to do?
Absolutely. I came in quite late to a case where someone who was an Irish national domiciled in an African country. Don't want to give too much details on a client case, but they had an Irish will, and 2 days later made a will in that African country, which revoked the Irish will.
Oh,
She obviously at the time was like, I'll get all my affairs in order within this week, I'll get it all done. But the intention was completely different. There were people he had intended to benefit under the Irish will that suddenly found themselves under the African country will. And yeah, there were people I had to have the conversation with to tell them, yes, you're named in the will. No, you're not inheriting.
wow. Okay. So, what happens then, assuming you have taken advice, you have reviewed your portfolio to determine what wills are required, and to summarize, what I think you're saying is that if you have Irish assets, you do well to have an Irish will. If you have foreign assets, is it too broad to say you do well to have a foreign will as well? Is that too broad a comment?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think you should have a foreign will as a general rule. If you have a foreign
Right.
asset, you want to have a will in that country. But I'm always happy to have a conversation with the solicitor in the foreign country and a conversation with yourselves as well, Stephanie, or other tax professional as to, what's the best way to deal with it. Because I can't advise on how things work in Spain or the US or anything like that. So it does involve like professionals talking to each other and putting the knowledge together and figuring out how this works for this individual because they're all individual cases. No two are alike.
I completely agree. And it always seems to start with the question of, you know, what does the client want? And then we work backwards. There isn't necessarily cookie cutter solutions to these cross border issues, whether it be legal or tax. Um,
That's exactly it. Yeah,
yeah, there might be routine ways we do things.
but working backwards, we know the outcome we want. So how do we get there?
Oh, talk me through high level. If we have a scenario, let's use a common scenario that we would find, and I think the majority of the listeners to this episode will kind of will resonate with them. Let's look at the scenario where, for example, we might have a UK estate and an Irish estate. Well, one estate with Irish and UK assets and two wills. When the executor or the family members need to go about taking action, what do you want to know? When do you want to hear from people in these scenarios to do your side of it? And what does that look like when we have assets in two jurisdictions?
I, I ideally want to hear from someone before they've died because that's the only time we can fix any problems that can arise. But the things we're looking for, I suppose, are that what assets fall under what will is the main thing. Ideally, in those kind of situations, you can have the two probate processes happening simultaneously. So you'll make your application in the UK, you'll make your application in Ireland, and even if it's often it's usually the one executor is dealing with both, but they're not waiting a year. Probate process takes a year here. From what I've seen, it seems to take similar time in the UK. So you're not waiting. You don't have to wait for one to finish to commence the other. If everything's done under one will, you do. You have to decide which is first. Yeah, which assets fall under which estate, which in relation to real property, houses, apartments, land, all of that, is clear cut. But then you're looking in relation to things like bank accounts, it mightn't be as clear cut. Shares can often be one that people don't even realize they have an asset in a foreign jurisdiction.
Yeah. And actually, side point there, you'd have come across this, I suppose, potential issues there as well, as I understand it, around, the amount of assets that can be left without the US potentially trying to levy tax on US assets, particularly when it's a non US citizen that is essentially investing. This is a common problem now that, people can so easily invest on something like a Revolut app. And if something happens such that, they have left that asset, what are the tax consequences of that? It can really get complicated, because really what you've just alluded to is a tripartite in that scenario where you've got US, UK, and in our example, Irish as well, issues ongoing. It starts to get complicated, doesn't it?
And it does. And I think that's life. People move around, probably more than they did in previous generations. And people are more financially, I suppose, confident as well. In this generation, they will invest in different and interesting things, whether that's like cryptocurrencies. I haven't had to deal with that in a probate yet.
Goodness forbid, yeah. Where is the key?
Yeah. So yeah, it's always a movable thing. Like there's always going to be new challenges for us to figure out and to solve.
And I think as well, the interesting point I'd make is I would see potentially in the scenario we used of our Irish UK, and you've just basically said you could have an Irish probate process ongoing, a UK one ongoing under two separate wills. To add complexity to it, you actually have two tax issues as well ongoing, because you have an Irish will with an Irish inheritance tax consideration. You have a UK will with the UK estate tax considerations, noting as well recent changes there in the UK where we have shifted, or about to, I'm not sure if it's been written into legislation at the time of recording this, but we're going to shift from a domicile basis to a residency basis with some rules there around interim periods. So you now also probably need tax advisors. And we would often find some solicitors will double up and do both tax and legal. But there is essentially, a consideration from a tax perspective. We have a treaty with the UK, but we need to understand what taxes are in the UK if we're going to credit them against certain assets, broadly UK situate assets, if Ireland's going to apply a tax. It's complicated.
That's it, because it's never straightforward. One thing about tax is it seems to be has been written in every jurisdiction to be as complicated as it possibly can be.
Yes. Feels like that sometimes.
So, yeah, we will often be advising clients that they need a tax professional on a case if it gets in any way complex, because you need to get it right. There's no way around that. So when you're sorting things out, but it's always best when you're planning it to have the tax professional in the conversation as well.
Thanks for listening to Tax Bites for Expats. Please do leave a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcast. And as always, remember to take professional tax advice specific to your personal circumstances before acting or refraining from action in connection with the matters dealt with in this series. The material in this podcast is intended to give general guidance only.